Hi, in this video, I'm going to review what a conditional green card holder can do if their spouse is not cooperating with them to help them fix their legal status, or they're separating from their spouse as well. My name is Rodrigo Canido. I'm an immigration attorney and I do videos on different immigration topics and how to get legal status in the United States. So if that's something that interests you, feel free to subscribe. All right, well, first of all, if you're separating from your spouse or your spouse doesn't want to help you out with, fixing your legal status, it's not necessarily the end of the world. You may have some options to still be able to fix your legal status. What is important though is that you meet the necessary deadlines with the form I-751. So if you're not familiar with this, when you have the conditional green card, right, it's generally for 2 years. So before those 2 years expire, you need to submit a form I-751 to remove the conditions of your green card, okay? If you don't do that, then what happens is the government may actually refer you to the immigration court. And once you're in immigration court, well, basically the government is trying to remove you from the country. In addition to that, you may have to hire a lawyer, right, in immigration court, which can be costly. Okay, so it's not a good situation to be in. It's just going to make your life much, much worse if you still want to stay living in the United States. Okay, so how do you fix this then, right, if you're in that situation? So like I mentioned, you have to submit the form I-751. Typically, when you're still together with your spouse, you would both sign that form together, okay? Now, if you're separating, okay, or you're in the process of getting a divorce, you can still submit that without their signature, okay? But what is key besides just submitting that form is submitting the correct evidence, all right? So the basic evidence that you always need to submit with this type of form is evidence that you entered into the marriage legitimately. It's a real marriage. And you didn't marry this person just to get a green card, just to get legal status, right? So the type of evidence that you need to submit with this could be, for example, financial records. So this could be like bank statements with both your names. It could be insurance documents with both your names. You could submit birth certificates of your children if you have children with this person, right? Obviously, having children with someone would make it look like the relationship was real, okay? You can also submit evidence of declarations, affidavits from people that know you. This could be friends, family, people that are familiar with the relationship, and how you guys met each other, that type of thing, right? So all this is meant to show just that, again, you marry this person for normal reasons, right? You loved them, you cared about them, and it wasn't, to get papers or to get a green card. Okay. So now let's look at what options you have if the person is not helping you with this. So the first one is just the basic divorce process, right? So there's actually a box you can check off in the form I-751. And that option says, if you're divorced or if you're divorcing, right? You can check that box and you submit paperwork to support that, yeah, you guys are divorced or are getting divorced. Just as an example, I have had a client before that was in the process of getting divorced, and we submitted the paperwork that she did, to start the divorce process. And in the back of the form, we wrote in that, my client was not divorced yet, but they were in the process of doing that. Okay, and that worked. All right. Another option, if you look at the form that there is if you've been the victim of abuse by your spouse. Okay, so if your spouse has hit you, has been abusive to you in different ways, that's something you can argue so you can help keep your legal status here. Okay, so you'd submit evidence of that, of course. So the type of evidence that might be helpful would be police records if the police were called due to the abuse. If, say, you put out a restraining order against your spouse, if, say, you have to go to the hospital because you were physically assaulted and, you had injuries that required you to seek medical attention, right? And so any records of going to the hospital could be helpful. If your spouse left you injuries, you could take pictures of the injuries and say, look what my spouse did to me, that type of thing. Something that I've done in the past is I worked with my client to do a declaration where we wrote out all of the abuse, all the details of the abuse that happened. Okay. I also had the client see a psychologist, and the psychologist was able to ask her questions and write down how the abuse affected her mental state, and then was able to provide an evaluation for that. Okay. So these are some ways you can help show that the abuse occurred. It doesn't have to be that the police were called automatically, all right? But if you have that type of police record, obviously it would be helpful. Okay, so that's another option that you can check off in the form. A third is if you can argue that you will suffer extreme hardship in your home country if you have to return because you lose your legal status. Extreme hardship could be many things, okay? But just to go through some examples, maybe you're dealing with some type of medical treatment here in the United States and you're not going to be able to receive that treatment in your home country. Maybe you're in some type of educational program, okay, that is not going to be available to you where you're from. Okay, another example could be maybe you purchased a house and you're going to lose your house if you have to leave the country. Okay. In more extreme situations, it could be that you're literally going to suffer physical harm if you return to your country, maybe due to persecution, right? Maybe if you return, the government there or people that live there want to harm you because maybe your religion, your political views, there's countless reasons, right? Why people want to hurt each other. So maybe you have a valid argument for that. And to show evidence of that, you could submit country conditions reports of that country. And you can even go so far as to hire an expert to write a declaration, explaining how you returning, will put you in danger because of the conditions of your country. Okay, so that's another option if you qualify, right? That you will suffer extreme hardship if you lose your legal status. And then the last one for a spouse is if your spouse actually dies. Okay, so if your spouse literally dies, then you'd submit the death certificate, right, of your spouse dying or that they have died. Okay, so again, don't feel automatically just because you're separating from your spouse, or if your spouse doesn't want to cooperate with you in this process, that you're going to have to leave the country. Okay, there might be a way around this, and I've gone through that. All right, but if you have any questions, I always say, talk to an immigration attorney so they can give you a more detailed answer as to the best way to move forward. And if you'd like to talk to me, my contact information is below. Thank you.